lebih memberkati majlis kita ni, kita buka dengan Ummul Quran Al-Fatihah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okey, alhamdulillah kita bersama malam ni, dan saya tak nak cakap panjang, maybe nanti Cik Fadzil introduce sikit lah sebab some of them ni masih lagi baru dan tak kenal siapa Cik Fadzil. Maybe you can introduce yourself, and then saya rasa tanpa melengahkan masa, saya menjemput Cik Fadzil lah untuk memberi tunjuk ajar pada kita tentang tajuk threat hunting. Actually this topic is very interesting, dan sangat hot lah sekarang, mana-mana everybody talk about threat hunting, threat intelligence, threat modeling lah. So what actually apa itu threat hunting? And satu lagi actually kita punya main purpose ialah as a preparation untuk kita punya competition Battle of Hackers this coming Saturday. Tapi saya tak nak kita fikir ke arah itu, sebab saya nak you all fikir tentang long term lah. Benda ni, this knowledge is very important. Bila you go pada industri, benda-benda ni semua sangat penting. So jangan nampak for competition sajalah. Okay, so Cik Fadzil, saya serahkan the floor to you.
Baik, terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Again, terima kasih Dr. Fakaya for inviting me to speak and share my knowledge. I think UiTM has been my consistent requester. Even though with my busy basically work schedule and life, but I give priority for UiTM. Every time Dr. Fakaria and other lecturers and professors asking, I give first priority to get it done. And with that, actually, for all who are attending, you are actually very lucky. I'm not saying that I'm the best in everything, but my almost 30 years of experiences was something. Especially my my experience started in the US before the World Trade Center incident. Remember the 9/11 or September 11, 2001, when the US World Trade Center was basically attacked, and after that, security became priority number one. So I had 17 years in experiences in Intel Corporation, first in the US and then later in Penang and Kulim. Out of those, I've done Security Operations Center, one of the key pioneer team who establishing that team. That was back in 2001, actually, right after the September 11, and then we established that team. So just imagine now it's 2023. We talk about all this detection and stuff like that. I've been there, done that more than 22 years on that one, right? So on top of that, talking about forensic earlier, I was the global lead or technical investigation lead for Intel Corporation, for the whole group or whole enterprise of Intel, right? Leading the forensic investigation for the whole enterprise. So we're not talking about just American guy who's actually leading a forensic investigation, but we got a Malaysian guy who's actually doing that. Something that you don't see or you don't hear out there, actually, because usually most of the time I keep it to myself. So today, that's just a brief introduction about me. I'm also now holding a position of Chief Information Security Officer at one of the biggest fintech company in Asia Pacific, called Silver Lake exists. Under that, there's a number of solution and entities. Previously, I was at Maybank as a Vice President and Head of Security Architecture, Governance, and Assurance for 4.5 years. All right, in total, 20 plus years, almost 30 years of experiences. All right, so today I've been asked to talk about threat hunting, right? And seems like it's a new field per se, but actually is not new, but the terminologies has been coined together to address one area that previously was misunderstood on the function and so on. Right. So today, just gonna talk a little bit about what it is, giving you the foundation of hunting, a threat hunting foundation. Some of differences between SIEM and central log management. That usually is one of the key tools that a threat hunter will be using. Of course, there's a number of other tools that they're going to use. And then methodology of effectively performing the threat hunting. Some of the correlation. I just want to share that the correlation slide that I created before, that was back in 2005. So just imagine the correlation concept and ideas is still applicable until now, and many people still not able to do it properly. And then understanding the threat modeling. There was a question about threat modeling earlier. Uh, and one of the key framework in threat hunting is MITRE attack framework. That's why I asked that you look into this, do some basically quick overview and reading on that, just to get an idea, because otherwise, if I talk about that, you'll be a total loss. All right, and then security log analysis, and one case was written out there that basically on performing a real threat hunting use case. They're using Kibana. Kibana will give you some say graphical visualization on some of the attack. However, there are some other tools that has a better visualization from my experiences. I'll talk about that later on. And then how to use that MITRE attack framework, just briefly on step by step, and then some conclusion on that. All right. So first of all, I do not want to stick to the slide. So if you have any question while I'm presenting, please ask the question. I don't mind to be disturbed. But just to let you know, it will be a totally big mistake if you don't ask questions. Big mistake if you don't ask questions. All right. Okay, so what happened is, from my experiences when I was the Security Operations Center analyst back in 2001, 2002, and so on. The because of the scope is not properly defined, so we basically created our own scope per se, to do the detection, to do the analysis, and so on. So if I compare with what I've done in the Security Operations Center role previously, I've done threat hunting, defined as threat hunting now. I do the detection, I do the investigation, I do the hunting, and then basically I find the threat within the environment. Back then, this is more than 20 years ago, right? So threat hunting, the initial part is coming from detection, monitoring, the security operations center role of doing the monitoring of the logs, do the correlation, find the needle in the haystack of the attack, and then you do further investigation, and then you do basically mitigation of the attack, right? So from there, when you look at a security event, you have a security event of interest, and you start investigating. When you're investigating, you performing the forensic analysis, whether it is part of the logs analysis. You do later on, you do the network part of the analysis. You might get the network packet dump, and you do further investigation, and then you might need to get some evidence from the host or the laptop, PC, or whatever it is, or devices, and then you do further analysis. So that is where the forensic analysis. If it's malware, then you do the malware reverse engineering. And then part of your hunting will involve understanding about attack, how the attackers coming into your environment, what the attackers are doing in your environment, what type of exploitation that they are performing in order for them to do the attack. How do they move and pivoting from one system to the next system to the next system until they reach to the goal? What is their goal of the attack, and how do they exploit that? And then what do they do once they reach the goal? Right, that's where the data exfiltration will happen. And then how do they exfiltrate the data out, right? You're talking about many of the data leakage cases. Not just megabyte, they got gigabytes of data. Some of them got terabytes of data that been stolen, exfiltrated out of the environment. You're not even aware about this exfiltration is happening, how it happened. How come you do not see that while you are performing 24/7 security monitoring, but you don't even see that the data has been basically taken outside of the environment? So because of that, you also need to understand about the attackers, right? That's where the cyber threat intelligence knowledge will help you to do the hunting. You need to know how the attack happened, who are those performing the attack, what's their capability of those who are attacking you, what tools do they use, what's their capability with the tools and the expertise that they got, how do they send those attack to you, how do they exploit your environment in order for them to get in. And then from there, you need to understand what vulnerabilities are they taking advantage of that they're able to exploit and get in. A lot of questions that you have to answer there. So that means that threat hunting is not just one area and then you're done. You do red team or pen testing, and then you look at from that scope is done. No, actually cover a number of areas. Similarly, if you do the forensic analysis, forensic also very wide. You need to understand about the application, understand about the operating system, understand about the system itself, understand about the encryption, key management, the security protection, all of that. You need to be able to do all of that in order for you to perform your duties, right? So in the diagram here at the bottom, I'm basically showing you the threat actor. So the threat actors, when they do the attack, right? They are using the IOCs. IOC is a indicator of compromise. So that means if they are sending you email with malware, that means the email is your IOC. Your IP address, the IP address that they use to send email is also the IOC. The domain that they use to jump and connect to you is also the IOC. All of that, right? So those are called the infrastructure of the basically the attackers in order for them to send, because this is where if you have a very deep knowledge of TCP/IP protocol, you know, um, TCP/IP protocol, the different type of protocol, the UDP protocol, TCP protocol, IP protocol, um, the ping, basically ICMP protocol, all of that. If you master all of these protocols, what will happen is you will understand certain attack can happen, certain attack cannot happen the way that you think it might happen. Good example is if they want to send an email containing the malware. So email is a protocol using TCP protocol. So if it's a TCP protocol, the connection between the sender to the recipient must use TCP protocol, means they must complete the three-way handshake, the syn act, and then act before they can push for the data for you to receive that email. Means what? If they use a bogus or a spoof domain, but the IP address must be correct or alive or in the network. You cannot basically deny that IP that been used to connect to your mail server must be a valid IP at that particular time because it's using TCP. If you're using UDP, they just send and forget. Potentially or high potential, it could be a spoof, right? So from that deep understanding of the protocol, you can basically understand whether this type of attack can happen or not. All right. So if you look at the MITRE attack framework on the right side, you use that as your guideline. The framework already previously 20 years ago when I did all of this, there's no such framework. There's no studies and basically compiling all the potential attack way or attack framework into one solid framework that can easily become your guideline. There's no such thing. So now they already have that. So you can use that as your a guideline to guide you in doing the threat hunting. If you look later on, we will look into that, and then within the MITRE attack framework contain very detailed step by step of how the attack can occur. Right. So using that and based on the forensic traces and evidence that you got, you try to determine whether attack has happened or not, and then from there you do further correlation from logs, the events, and then you use either tools or you use your own. So that's a methodologies I will discuss on that, and understanding about the vulnerabilities that's been exploited. All of that become some of the areas that threat hunter need to be efficient with in performing their task and their job, right? Okay, so the foundation of threat hunting in performing this hunting, as you can see, there are 6 common stages. One is compromise, second is recon, and CNC. CNC is basically a server when they do the recon, and then they will have to send that data. Usually call it a C2, command and control. All right. So when they do the recon, they will have a command and control server to receive that data, that communication. All right. Once basically they have the control within that environment, then they will start doing what we call a lateral movement. So from the first system that they compromised, but the system is not their goal, then they can start basically looking for other system for them to compromise until they reach the target. And usually the target is a system with the data that they are looking for. Is a database server, certain files, certain intellectual property, whatever it is that they're looking for. And then they do the escalation. So when they do the lateral movement, sometimes they do not have the privilege for them to exploit to do a further basically access. So they will perform what we call a privilege escalation. Many times they're coming in as a regular user. All right, so they compromised regular user privilege processes, and then from there they try to get to the admin or the root privilege. So they're performing what we call a privilege escalation exploitation. Once they uh, able to get the highest administrative or root privilege, and then what they do, they will access the data. Once they access the data, they're performing what we call exfiltration. They collect the data and then they send it out. How do they send it out? There's a long discussion about that process itself. MITRE framework is also your reference, right? And then how to set the permanent. So usually when you coming in into a system and then you compromise, there are many ways that basically the system might be got rebooted, and then basically the certain patch that is installed, causing you to lose your presence, your access to the system that you spend many days or months to basically take over the system. So in order for them to come back and reconnect and access that again, they made that access to become persistent, right? There are many ways of doing that. So those are if you look at the MITRE framework on how do they set the persistence presence in that system or network. Yeah, so if you check all of that, those are the areas that you need to check in when you are performing um, your threat hunting. All right. So first of all, when you are doing the hunting here, you need to know your data. I might want to run a little bit fast. at 9:20 already, so we got almost 1.5 hours. I still got I think about 45 or 50 pages to go. I will go through fast on some of the areas, ask question if you have any questions. But the key is I put it there so that it become your reference. Um, but I might not cover some of those areas. So if I don't cover, you want some explanation, please ask. All right. So first of all, when you perform your hunting, you need to know your data, because when you performing threat hunting, it based on your hypothesis. In our environment, in your environment, for example, what type of attack potentially happen, depending on your basically infrastructure or the systems application that's running. So a good example, if you have a system, web-based system behind that web-based, you have a database, let's say JPN or Jabatan Pendaftaran Negara, and then it's basically has the web-based basically request form to check your IC number, whatever, right? This is just an example. So that's a web base. Behind that web base, it has an application. Behind the application, you got the database containing all. We talk about the digital ID, right? It's coming. I'm not sure whether it's done securely or not, but it's coming. So just imagine it's a digital ID server behind that under JPN, and then the attacker want to basically exfiltrate and copy or steal that database, right? Because if let's say we got all JPN database, they got everybody's in the whole country. All right, so if you look at that environment, you have web base, you got apps, and you got DB in the back end, and then you have some other systems, right? Including Office system, those are accessing remote access and so on. So knowing that data, all right, and the environment, you need to start doing your coming up with hypotheses. If people want to compromise your environment, how do they get in? So first of all, it's internet facing your web server. From your web server, what else? You have a user coming in from remotely from home, working from home. Okay, and then you got the developer, all of that, right? So that's the first thing. I'll talk about the process later on. Let's just give you some thought about that. All right. So from there, you will start doing your hypothesis. Now you need to check whether the web server has any traces of any web attack, any web exploitation, any malware that's been downloaded, things like that. Any vulnerability, known vulnerabilities on that web server. Yet, is there any potentially 0-day on that web server? All of that. So you are focusing your hypothesis focus on the web attack. That's the first part, and then you start digging, right? So that's the first part. It differs from the SOC. So when I talk about the SOC before, um, where I do look at the alert, we have the correlated event, we check on the correlated event, and we start investigating. It is a true attack, true positive, or it's a false positive. False positive is the basically the logs. The event was generated, but the real event or things that are happening that's been detected is actually normal, right? So we do not want that. So end up we are shifting a lot of false positive, investigate on them, and conclude is false positive until you find the true positive. So many times you are looking at the correlated event or the use cases. Nowadays they call it use cases. Use cases based on whatever that you want to detect, and then you go your analysis from there. Those are the new, basically the current security operations center theory that many people are using. There's a good pro and con with that approach. So usually what they do is they got the first line of defense or first tier, second tier, and then they got the expert in the back end. So the first one, first level, they will basically look at this one is correlated event, and then this is from security event or is actually exploiting web attack. All right, and then you will pick that and create a ticket. And then the basically the ticket will be sent to second level. Second level will do the investigation. Right. So the first level just pick whatever that basically a potential attack, and then create the ticket. Done. right? So very shallow, and you can talk sideline on that one. On my ideas a little bit different than that, but that's how people do it nowadays with first year, second year, third year, and so on. All right, so from threat hunting perspective, you do it differently. You're not looking at correlated events or event or interest that's coming to you. You created the hypothesis based on your knowledge of the environment and so on. What are the potential attack that will come in, will exist in your environment, and then you start drill down. Right? That's how you do it. Um, the two of areas, the central logs management and ICM. This is always there's always a discussion on this because when people have SIEM, they said, I do not need central log management. Those with central log management, they said, I do not need SIEM because I got all the logs. So both are actually for different purposes. SIEM usually um, have a full team, the SOC team, and then the capability of the SIEM will have a retention period for the data. You cannot have all the data for you to do the correlation. It will make it very, very slow. So they have a limited period of time, limited type of data in order for them to have the correlation working well, and for you to do the detection, right? So that's what happening. Because of that, when you are doing investigation and you need the data more than the date that can be supported by the SIEM, you do not have the data. So usually what happen is they will have, one is SIEM, second is central log management. So the log from the each of the servers, one is sent to SIEM, so log server. For SIEM that can support all the logs, like example is Splunk. Splunk is actually started from log server, log management server. So you dump all the logs into Splunk, and then you have the Splunk Enterprise on top of it with the SIEM function. All right, and then you will have the archival also on for the logs. All right, so that's different, but of course it has dual capabilities there. But most of the time, you will have a very simple log server or syslog server, and you dump all the logs there and you keep it for X years, X number of years. You usually in FSI or financial institution will require up to 3 years minimum. All right, and some require up to 7, depending on what type of data. All right, so when you have this, the central log management, the purpose is to keep all the logs for potential investigation later. And SIEM, you have the logs for the specific period for you to do the correlation and do the detection. When you do the threat hunting, are you using one or the other? Actually, you using both. You use any for you to achieve the hypothesis that you created. The more visibility to all those data, the better. But you need to do it in such a way that you are doing it, performing it in the efficient way, so that you will not waste your time digging on a wrong place, looking at the wrong time. So that is why the MITRE attack framework is very crucial to guide you, to keep you on the right path, right? Effective threat hunting. So this is where usually when you want to define the attack scenario, we talk about pen test earlier. That's why I said if you have knowledge on pen test, red team on attack, you have one or you come up with the scenarios. All right. Another one, if you have the cyber threat intelligence knowledge, that also give you another point of view that will enhance your knowledge to create the attack scenarios. Some of those related from the CTI perspective, understanding about the TTP. TTP is tools, technique, and procedures. So when the attackers try to hack you, they have a tools. Maybe they use uh, um, what they call um I forgot, which is a tool that will do the SQL injection, for example, right? The tool will do the SQL injection. And then the technique, they will inject that SQL injection on the memory, and then the process inform that tools in order for the injection to happen. All right. So when you understand the TTP usually is what is the capability that the attackers has in order for them to attack you. All right. So with this knowledge, the TTP tools, technique, and procedures, now you can use your MITRE framework again, because those technique and procedures that they are performing potentially is already captured. At least one of them is already captured in the MITRE framework. A lot of people actually, when they learn about security, they don't even get exposed to the framework. That is one key reference that script professional are using, because the whole compilation is already there. You just use it. You come up with your strategy scenarios, as well as rules for detection and all of that. Right. So if your environment has antivirus, so certain antivirus, you can create rules, and then you can specify some of those basically specific detection. If is safe and details, it can actually, you can set a rules to detect certain things inside your registry, for example, right? At the registry level, at the file level, you create that rule and then do the detection there. So if the detection is positive, you get an alert, or, or logs on that particular specific rules that you created. One day at this buy stage, usually this is another place where experience will make a difference. You make the informed guess on whether uh, this will require that tool. So if it's in memory, what kind of tools, at the file level, what kind of tools to do the one. All right. So the key is you hunting that IOCs, or indicator of compromise. You not just to detect an event. You are hunting for the IOCs, right? And then you identify and gather evidence to further investigate the hypothesis. So once you have the hypothesis, you created the rules and you access that, and then you create basically informed guess on what tools you need to use, and then you start gathering the data. So that's what the idea where those data might come from. All right, and then you look at whether from the data that you got, whether you can prove or, or, or you disapprove that the, and then on my many years I've been doing forensic, I do the same thing. The data, the evidence I extracted from the subject of investigation, the suspect, is it enough to prove or disapprove on the allegation this guy X Y? Oh, actually I do not have any evidence showing that that was what happened. So many times we feel that we do a good thing as well, that people that falsely accused actually got cleared from that the process. You need to do the correlation. So let's say if disapprove, still kind of not sure. So you correlate that data. All right. So when you do correlation, you use the analytical skills, visualize, and then from that he did something, right? And then of course the report. Most of the time report is the most important step, but many times you doing it very lousy report. So work that you have done actually rely on the report result. You need to do it correctly. All right. So let me basically cover a little bit about the correlation just as well, but I'll go quickly on this one. Correlation dt plus RT where exposure time ET and then detection plus the reaction time. All right. So that is ultimate goal, that the exposure equal the detection and the reaction time. And then you need to understand, when you do the correlation, you only see the tip of the iceberg. Every time you do all of this, you just see the tip of the iceberg. The rest of them still hidden. You have to dig further. Uh, um, and one important part is, which I believe until now, and it is become security, job security per se for all the security folks. Do not trust your tool. Do not trust your tools. Do not trust your tools. Trust your judgment. Means what? You talk about TCP/IP, I know it like the back of my hand. You talk about this tool, I know it the back of your hand. You talk about all of this, and then you look at the tool's wrong. I'm correct. I prove it, and this is what I did when I was in the US. We are using one IDS product called Manhunt. Right. So I detect one basically event. I look at it. Wow, this is basically an interesting one. And when I did the analysis, basically I find out actually, compared with the packet and then with the system and the applications using that, I found out actually Manhunt was actually missed by 1 bit, misreading the packet by 1 bit, causing it to misfire. So it's a flaw within that product itself. And then when get escalated and talk to the vendor, find out actually you're right, is a flaw in our product. So again, don't trust the tool, trust your judgment. Your judgment is based on deep knowledge of the field and the area, right? All right, so I'll go next one. The rest you can read on your own. And then you need to have the host of the events. This is a number of things. As I talked about that earlier, could be syslog, HIDS, HIPS, even log files, apps logs, antivirus, network level. You got the network intrusion detection system, network intrusion prevention system, network behavior, anomaly detection, firewall. You can look at all of that. There's a number of sources that you can look at, and the key thing is whether that logs will be beneficial for you in you validating your hypothesis, right? Some of the area of basically perimeter of defense that you need to understand. So when you look at your environment and look at the logs, or the event that you are investigating and you are basically hunting, you need to know where the placement of the system or the logs, source of the logs that you looked at, whether is outside internet facing and potentially within the DMZ, demilitarized zone, or could be in the internal zone, or could be in the extranet zone, depending on the zone, right? Because I've seen from my experiences, um, you look at when then look at the that's been generated. So good example. You have you are within the DMZ, so you have two firewall. For example, you have firewall. One is internet facing firewall, and then you have the internal firewall, and then you are located behind the internal firewall. So by default, if you are within the internet, intranet, right, which is inside network, you have the DMZ in between the inside network and the internet. But you are seeing packets or source IP coming from the internet in the intranet. So you have two firewall, outer facing and inner facing. If you see a packet from internet inside your intranet network, you are in trouble, right? How do you determine whether it belongs to external or not? Then you need to look at the file configuration, the IP routing, and so on. But the key is, if you see internet IP within your intranet environment, you are in trouble, right? So knowing the perimeter of defense, where the network or the systems located within your network is crucial. And then from there you can do further analysis, right? Um, know your firewalls, as I mentioned, outer facing, inner facing, and so on. The type of filtering that it has. So many times when I ask people, especially during the interview, they cannot answer this. Uh, First, most comprehensive, most basic firewall is packet filtering firewall. PF Sense, for example, that is packet filtering firewall. And then you got more advanced firewall like Checkpoint. You got a number of others. Those are stateful firewall. And then you got the next one, internal facing. You are using the proxy. Those the application firewall. What's the difference and why you have different type of firewall? Um, well, this is not a session to talk about that, but you should start searching and basically understand about that different type of firewall. All right, each one has their own advantages and disadvantages. That's why they are actually placed in different location for different purposes. But nowadays with firewall, you can bypass all three if your security is not intact, I would say. All right, know your IDS, IPS, IDS intrusion detection system, IPS intrusion prevention system. People are talking about mostly the management. They said, why we need IDS if we have IPS? We have the intrusion prevention. Why do we need the intrusion detection? So that is different capabilities, different purposes. IDS can do the detection as well as can be your forensic. If something happen, then forensic of your IPS. Forensic of your IPS, any intrusion, any false true positive detection, then it will block that. If it's a false positive, it will also block that, causing a denial of service attack within your environment. So many times, if you have IPS, either it's network intrusion prevention or host intrusion prevention, the rules that's been enabled is very, very little. And many times, sometimes they just enable at learning mode, not even preventing mode. So the checkbox audit said, do you have IPS? Yes, we do have network IPS. Do you have it set to prevention? Actually not, right? If you check details, you will see a lot of things actually you claim versus what reality is actually two different things. And then your audit capabilities. Again, this is where the log management required. When you do the correlation, you will do the correlation of all the event logs from different sources and so on. The host level defenses, antivirus logs, the operating system. Windows OS log is one of the key area that you need to look at. So, for example, I'll basically have the example for that later on. And then doing threat hunting in some of these areas or doing the correlation is a very I would say daunting task, a lot of work. So you need to automate as much as you can. I understand that some of you will be involved in the contest, and one of the contest scope would be threat hunting. We will talk about some of the tools that you can use. Worst case scenario, you're going back to the command line and set the time, right? Rather than just not doing anything and not finding anything. And then what and where to automate, group your asset, type of correlation. I think you already know. If you have a network, you have a firewall. If you have a network, you have a firewall. If you have a firewall, you have a type of correlation. you can read on your own, by rules, by heuristic, fuzzy logic, artificial intelligence, hybrid, and so on. You can read, and then the constraint, right? When you do the correlation, time constraint is one of the key areas that you need to really focus, because if you set a correlation rule, so one of the correlation rules, if you see a web exploit attack, right? So that's one of the first condition. If you see a web exploitation attack, and then what? Then within 1 minute, you see malware down within 1 minute, right? Exploit and then download. So if you do a testing in your pen test, you have web exploitation. After that, you want to download the malware. You do that in 5 minutes, within a few seconds, or you do it after 1 hour. That knowledge will tell you my correlation rule should be after exploitation is detected, it should be done within 15 seconds. Okay, 15 seconds, let's put it 1 minute. Oh, 30 seconds, right? 1 minute. All right, so the first one, web exploitation, malware download within 1 minute. That's a first uh, time constraint that you set. Next one, it happened on web server. So if, and then the basically the target equal to web server from your environment. There are, let's say, 100 web servers. Those IP 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The target, is it equal to that? Yes or no? None. None. Then it's a false. The attack tried to do the exploitation, and it actually malware download, but it's not a web server. Is not fully false positive. Why the exploitation happened, and then why there's a malware download, but it's not on the web server. Huh? Server is internet facing, and then you find out actually that file server is running a web service as well. Many times this happen, right? Because people want to bypass, you have to do it live tomorrow. Just go ahead and install that web server and set it up. Done deal. Monday we need to go live, right? People bypass process, and then that's what happened, right? So when you look at that, you need to use your logic. Again, you don't trust your own judgment. Now, because of that, you identify, there's non-compliance out there and causing the attack happen, right? So that is where, when you set the time constraint, and then usually when you time constraint, so how long do you think you can have the processes waiting on the memory? So let's say the way you set it up will trigger them actually save in the memory waiting for the next event, right? Then you kill your server or you kill your system. All of this just from my own experiences, where we created a rule and then it kill our SIEM server because the time constraint is not correct, or causing too many triggered and so on. All right, so you need to understand that. And then for those who are actually going to work in the SOC environment, you need to digest this, because you will see this in your work environment. Maybe not directly. If you are first level, you don't see that, but you will see the impact of that. Second or third level of the team might have to resolve that, but you know where it's coming from, right? And second is the graphical representation. You can simplify the view of the data, the flow of the data, and so on. This is example of the correlation. Internet incoming, the outer IDS. Detect or not? Yes. And then next one, outer firewall. Is it accepted or deny? Accepted. And then the internal idea. So you go step by step. This is also a technique called threat modeling. There was a question about threat modeling earlier. So I'll talk about threat modeling afterwards. This one you can basically read, but form of data representation can be graph. Graph is, I think, so boring. Chart is also so boring. Um, link graph is one of the interesting one that I like since more than 2 decades ago, right? And let's take a look. So this is example, a scanning graph. So when you do a scan, this is a scene scan. When you do a scene scan, you send a scene packet to a target, either single target, multiple targets, and then you spread, sending to all those hosts. What happened is, you look at that. I used to dream this, dream packets. It might be crazy, but I was crazy then. Then, all right. So I dream packets, including dissecting the packets. I look at the hexadecimal of the packets. I can tell you whether it's TCP, what's the IP address, what, by not using a graphical view, it's just TCP dump. All right. So this one is pretty simple. All right. From the source, and then going to the multiple target. You see the target is 1x, y, and then dot 1, dot 2, dot 3, and so on, right? And then you got different numbers. All of them are on the same port number of the target, and then with a scene packet or scene flag. So that will be the visualization of this activity using a link graph, right? Very easy. And if you look at from the link graph, I created this on the worm propagation back then. All right, it's very simple. So you can see from the first one, it starts scanning the whole environment, and it hit another machine. That machine got infected and starts spreading, and basically start scanning other system as well. All right, so it hit one system, and then nothing happened because that system is not vulnerable, not get infected, and then nothing happened. Right. So that's the second stage. So the third stage is, you will see it starts spreading. Right. So the first host go to second host, second host that basically scanning, and then the third host got infected and still doing the same. If you look at the lateral movement attack, you will see something similar, except the activity will be on a specific protocol of that attack. So let's say they are using SMB. You will see from one server to the next server to the third server to the fourth server, all of them using same protocol, and they're going with that graph, linkaging between each one. This one is moving average. As you can see, a monitored event and moving average of the event. You will see that the red one on port 445, for example. So you can see some anomaly there. All right. So the increase in moving average on the activities is actually start increasing. All right. So threat modeling, as was asked, there are multiple ways of you can perform the threat modeling. Some of those are attack trees threat modeling. Is quite simple. Many people are doing that. I've shown that example earlier. The stride threat modeling, directional threat modeling is also simple one. Attack libraries modeling, example, a threat modeling. So you got the web server, and then the web server behind that, you get a network attack, you got a physical attack, all right? Potentially physical. And then you got APT, you got type of apps attack, you got the test environment. So usually you have a production environment, you got the test environment, you have the test environment attack as well. You got the black box attack, potentially, you got lateral movement, all of this, right? So you go by trees. So you start with the root, and then you go with the branches, and then you go with a smaller branches, and so on. You for these branches, and then you nail down and deep dive into that. So this become your hypothesis, and then and the details you are using the MITRE attack, and each threat modeling is using what we call spoofing. Then the desirable is authentication. Example of control is one time password, and so on. So if you look at the tempered, the desired is integrity. any integrity checking or basically integrity controls? Does it use hashes? No hashes. Then it's potentially has been tampered, and so on, right? So Stride is using all of these areas, the threat areas on the left side, and then you look at the desirable and whether the control is there, whether it can be compromised or not. Directional is usually is very simple one, and I like this most of the time because as I gave an example earlier, I was using the directional threat modeling. So it's coming from outside, from internal, the internet coming into the DMZ, and DMZ into the intranet within internal network, and then you basically start doing the analysis from each and looking at the evidence, whether what type of evidence located in what area, and then from there you can understand whether that makes sense or not. If it doesn't make sense, and you dig further. Lastly is the attack libraries modeling. So this one, you look at for software version, this 0.11 for example has 58 attack libraries. They cover hardware, software, whatever it is, and then the OWASP top 10 uh, covering all these top 10 libraries of attack, right? So you database, does it use the SQL injection? Yes or no? Right? You might not know, but you check it out. It's a web server. What is the vulnerabilities exist on a web server? Then potentially web injection, potentially web exploitation, all of that, right? So you compile, because of that is a web server, you compile all the libraries, attack libraries for web attack, and then you check. It's been so quiet. Maybe you totally lost, or maybe I'm totally lost. No question so far. All right. Now you go to the MITRE attack framework. All right. It look complicated. It is complicated, but if you know what it is, it's just like piece of cake, right? So you understand the reconnaissance. Reconnaissance is try to collect information about the target. Resource development. Um, so they try to get access to the environment, and then what do? They will do the initial access, and then they execute it, and then they create the persistent, and then they will escalate their privilege escalation to get the highest possible, and then evasion, defense evasion. So make sure that they will not get detected by the forensic investigator, by the threat hunter, and so on. So that means you need to master this defense evasion, because otherwise they are hiding from your hunting with this technique under the defense evasion. And then the credential access, what kind of credential access that they are performing. If you look at that modify authentication process, multi-factor authentication interception, all of that. Just imagine MFA considered hard to bypass control, right? But not true, depending on what kind of MFA. So you need to look into that. It's listed there. I mean, I asked to look into that. So far, any question on this one? Maybe not. All right. So let's look into one of the area, the sub technique. So earlier that was the very high level, and then you go down a little bit further. Under the execution technique, there are a number of ways that you can execute the malware. One of them is PowerShell. If they use PowerShell, what type of attack they are performing? Do you know? Anyone want to answer? If they're using PowerShell, what is the name of the attack that they are performing? In front of me, we got the master student here. You surrender? Our Palestinian brothers and fighters, they do not surrender to anyone, especially to the Israelis. So you want to surrender to me? All right, no answers. Any answer? What's the name of the attack if the attackers is using PowerShell to run their exploit? Don't know. You start Googling probably. Okay, so they're running the PowerShell, they're running the Apple script, which is Apple environment, Windows command shell, Unix shell, whatever it is. So in order for them to execute, they might use one of these uh, command line and scripting interpreter in order for them to execute the malware, right? Or the malware or the tools, whatever that they are using, in order for them to compromise the system, right? All right, so maybe if you can Google my question earlier, let's see if anyone can answer. All right, so that is a subtechnique. All right, so if you go further down, subtechnique, you have what we call the detailed example of attack that has happened using that particular technique. So in this example, if you look at the APT3, that type of attack has been identified as G0022. The ID is G0022, and that was performed by a threat actor group called APT3. That's why I said, if you look at this MITRE attack framework, beside knowing the attack techniques, beside knowing the forensics, the CTI or cyber threat intelligence will also an area that you will learn. If you're not mastering that yet, you will learn from here. The APT3 is a threat actor group. As I mentioned, there's a like a diamond shape. The threat actor is the top, and then you got TTP. TTP is difficult to find out. Threat actor is the most difficult. And then below that, you got the IOC, which is the infrastructure of the attack, the IP address, domain, email address, and so on, right? So the APT3 in this case, basically every time they attack, they will add and create an account to local admin group to maintain their elevated access to that server, right? As you can see, APT41 has added user account to the user and admin group. So APT3 add to the local admin group. What's the difference? Right? So these are the technique that they use every time they attack. But you are collecting this procedure used by the attacker. Now, looking at this, there could be some copycat using the same technique. So that is where you need to start basically differentiating, collecting a number of behavior that used by the threat actors, and then basically classify that properly. Okay, so that's one example. And then if they are running the command execution, right, the data source is command, and then the data component is command execution, you see that the execution actually include a file such as etc sshd underscore config. Do you know what has been attacked here?
SSH,
It's
SSH.
SSH, right? SSH. So a number of times people have the perception that they are running SSH and they are secure, right? They are running SSH is a secure service. I'm secured. And they use that internet facing and they use that to make a secure file transfer of their critical data from one server to the partner or whatever. Not knowing that actually this SSHD already been, the config file has been changed. Many times SSH service itself, the daemon that's running has been Trojan or has been compromised. Yeah. It's actually very interesting if you start setting this. The bottom one is the the ID DS0036 under the group. So now what they do is the data component is group modification. Under this one is Windows event. If you look, there's a such event ID 4738, 4728, and then 4670. So if you are going for the contest, I'm not sure whether you will have a internet access or not. If you have internet access, but then you need some speed in order for you to identify what event, what it is, and so on. How do you collect all of that? If you go to the internet and search every time, it will slow things down. You might want to download that, create a database, and quickly search, automate that search, whatever. So the event that you see, and then when you collect, let's say you're giving a host, and then you extract the event ID from the host, and you're looking for, let's say, a group modification. You're looking for the ID 4738, 4728, and 4670. You extract that, compile that with your database, basically compare with your database, find it, okay, and then find out the time. Once you got the time, okay, at this 10 o'clock p.m. tonight, actually, that's the date that the 4738 occurred. 4728, for example, occurred 2 minutes after that. 4670 occurred 10 minutes after that, in sequence. One example. So the group actually been modified. What do they, and then you start searching for other things, right? So event for that particular, if you go up here, that particular execution, for example, that one's under credential access, for example, right? So credential access, let's see, password cracking, password spraying, whatever, right? So under that, there's certain event ID will be generated. So each one, you nail that down. Then when you're hunting, you see one of those, then what is it, right? So you do mapping back to the MITRE framework. All right, so next one is the group modification here. Under the detection, group modification, and then you have the account manipulation. So earlier that was group modification, and within that you have another detail, ID T1098, you have account manipulation, changes to the account objects and or permission of the system of and the domain. 4738, 4728, and 4670 is also there. So if you look for that, yeah, this is event ID, what number? 4738. What is the username? The subject is dadmin. Target account is K Smith. What are they trying to do? Anyone can tell me? Come on, you are forensics, master forensic students. Very, very likely they're using the dadmin. They're giving K Smith admin access, right? They elevate the account that they're using, whatever. They created an account, and then basically they give admin access to that account. And then that become their permanent access. So when you do forensic, similarly, when basically you do a threat hunting like this, and then you need to do forensics, you will need to look at, okay, at this time, event occurred when the account has been created, and then you go backward, right? So account with root access, with administrative access, you need to look for that file. So the earlier I showed to you, let's see, this one. Is that this one? Yeah, this one. So if you look at the APT3, they created local create accounts to local admin groups. APT41, user and admin groups. What's the difference? APT3, they're only targeting for that local system. So the local admin group. So the administrative groups that they maintain is only on that server. The APT41, they creating that account, edit the account in the user and admin groups. Very likely this is the Active Directory level. Okay, you see the difference? Again, forensic, you need to be detail oriented. You need to look at the small things that you might see. All right, so so when you do this hunting, I don't think UITM has SIEM. Do you have that, Prof? Um, but at least you can play around with Splunk. I'm not a Splunk expert. I used to use it, but I got a friend actually used to be a student at UITM as well, doing master. Just graduated. He is a Splunk expert. All right, but the key is you can use Splunk for free, up to 500 megabyte of logs. All right, so you can play around with this tool, and then if let's say potentially the logs that require analysis in the contest is less than that, then you can use it. If you basically end up basically need to analyze gigabytes of data, then you need to find an alternative. This is a potential alternative, open source log analysis. Quite a lot of people actually using ELK and then plus Kibana. Kibana would be the graphical view representation of the data, but the backend is using ELK. There are a few others. Syslog Next Gen is more on the logging, centralized logger. But still, you can use it as long as you can support the logs, and then you can do query against log, right? I do not have experiences on all of this, but something you can explore, right? Um, when it comes to the worst case scenario, you do not have any of the tools, but you have some niche area and skills that you have potentially SQL. So what happened was when I joined the forensic investigation team in Intel Corporation. Intel is at that time was Fortune 50, Fortune 50, Fortune 100. Now with all this Facebook, with whatever it is, the hardware company become much. I think now Fortune 200, Fortune 500, something like that. They go lower because the value, the market capitalization has been more into the what they call the stock media kind of thing, right? So the key is when I joined, my friends actually what they're doing is when they got a number of logs, when they do the forensic analysis, to dump that into other type of tools, you need to buy all the tools and so on. But we have MS SQL, we have MySQL. They just create that and then dump everything there and write its own query. So that's something you can do. So you got a lot of those. You just need to know how to ingest all those logs and then do the query within that database. That's one. If you are a SQL guy, if you're not, you might be able to create a script in Python, Perl, whatever that of your choice, on how to search basically the data from the logs that you got. If you are down to the worst, you got only Excel skill set, you can also ingest that into Excel spreadsheet. But bear in mind, Excel, once it hit the maximum, it will exit, right? It will crash. So it cannot be used for very extensive type of data. If that also not become of your choice, you're out of choice, right? So worst thing is come to the worst. You can use the Unix tools, Unix Linux tools, the command line. I use it many times. The grab. So let's say if you're dumping basically the data logs into your intent initially try to open it in Excel, but it's too big, right? So rather than make it .xls format, you make it .cvx, right? So it's in the text. So you can run your search on that file, right? So don't use the when you extract and dump the logs, don't use any of the binary or proprietary format. Use the text format that you can import to different type of tools, as well as you can run text search into that file. Good example is grep, find, curl, many others. And then you can create script using bash or C shell. I used to be Unix guy, but I forgot many of them. But the thing is, con shell, all of that. Up to you. I mean, in terms of your choice. But that require Unix or Linux OS. You can run on virtualized environment as well, running Linux for that. But sometimes if you have the data on your Windows and then you need to import that, or you run file share and then try to run it, it slow things down. What you can do is you install Cygwin, which is a Linux ported into Windows. You install the Cygwin and you have the similar capabilities, just like Linux. The command line format will be different because it's Windows format. So example is if you want to go to the directory, you cd space slash forward slash and then go to the directory in Linux, right? But in Windows using Cygwin, a cd space backslash, right? So you need to learn about that and get yourself familiarized. All right, so let's see. You got 40 more minutes. Okay, so at least you know worst case scenario what you need to do. So your systems, you need to have this ready for you to do all the searches that you wanted, right? Any questions so far? No question again. All right. This is one example of the real world threat hunting use case. This one they're using Kibana. And the adversary in this case is APT3. So the hypothesis saying that is a Chinese government APT threat actor, and basically is targeting the aerospace engineering and communication companies. Many of the attack from China actually, they are looking for intellectual properties data. You might seen the stealth fighter, the F-22 Fulcrum, 22 Raptor, the US jet fighter. And if you look at the J-20, the stealth fighter by China, you see a lot of similarities there, right? So is an real known knowledge that China was basically stealing the intellectual property from US, and they use that to build the capability for their country, um, including the chip development and manufacturing. So a good example is Intel US has been allowed by US government to build their chip manufacturing in China. That was at Dalian, and the criteria given is the the chip technology must be -2, so must be 2 generation behind than the current technology that US Intel is producing. So for example, if they're using 1 micron, or let's say 1 nano, then the China one must be 2 technology behind. So let's say 1 nano, previous one was 2 nano, and prior to that is 3 nano. So only 3 nano is allowed in China. The 1 nano is in US. So what happened is after a few years, quite a few years, but then China was able to create and produce their own chip, right? And they have their own chip now. All right, so that is what they are doing, and they steal that intellectual property for their own advantages for the country. So some of this actually they acquired the cyber attack tools that was created by the NSA. NSA is National Security Agency. Inside that, they have the most mathematician actually hired within that department, and they are very secretive. One department will not talk to other departments. Within the departments, they also have sub-department that not talking to other sub-department within the same department, and so on. They are very, very silos. They're very secretive. So what happened was they created cyber tools to hack into other countries' system, right? And you might, if you never heard of this, you need to Google and start learning about this. The first one was established or created by CIA agent, CIA department. So the Central Intelligence Agency by the US. They created what tools that they call Vault 7, VAULT 7. You should, if you're not familiar, you should be familiar with this tool, Vault 7. And then for NSA, they have the tool. They had multiple tools, but then the tool was leaked out by Shadow Broker. So we just call it Shadow Broker. Inside that there are multiple tools. So what happened was when the NSA tools was leaked out by Shadow Broker, the China Link threat actor was actually able to get that data or that tools even prior to that, and they use the 0-day existed on that tools to attack their targets. Of course, it was hidden tools, it's a secret tools, and then they're able to bypass controls, and they're able to attack the target, right? All right, so the initial phase, if you look at that, initial compromise and establishment of command and control channel on the phase one on the left side, right? Compromise and CNC. So they have the C2 setup, software packing, obfuscate the files, obfuscate to ensure that people weren't able to detect and understand what is the files, and then you from that they go to initial access. On the second phase, they compromise the host, and then they do the discovery, and then they do the defense evasion, and then they do the privilege escalation. So the discovery, and then they start doing lateral movement, right? And then they start executing. If it's able to do the privilege escalation, they will start doing the casual access. They get the root access or admin access. And then once they do that, at the same time, they will create persistence. They create an account, they will set up that account, give the administrative privilege for that account so that they have the persistent access. And then they will hide the account, all right, and so on. So once they accomplish that, they will do the third phase, collect the data, what they wanted. In this case, is all the intellectual property data, the design, all of that, and then they compress the files and they stitch that file for exfiltration. So usually what they do, let's say if you zip the file, you can zip a file and spread that to multiple files. So let's say to make it not visible, let's say rather than 1 gig file, you break it down to 10 kilobyte file, 1,000 of them, right? And then you start sending one at a time every hour or every 1 minute or something like that. If you do real monitoring, persistent monitoring, then you will see how come there's a 10 kilobyte extra data every minute or every hour from this host going out. And let me tell you something, majority of the security operation center as well as any monitoring, then they're not monitoring that kind of thing. All right, so this is example, and then you will see the remote registry entered at the running state, software protection been stopped, and hardware detection service entered the running state, and then you got Microsoft Windows kernel general. So all of these are some of the detailed information on that system that's been compromised. All right, and then the script on the Windows, you will see this one is using VB script, and then you see that PowerShell, right? So what again? PowerShell is what? Is basically a language, right? It's not just a script. It can be a language on its own. It's very powerful, actually. I used to give a talk at UKM on PowerShell when it was basically released by Microsoft back then, many years ago. But it's a very powerful scripting language that you can do a lot of stuff. Right. So what it does here is they create a VB script, and then within that VB script contain PowerShell command to run, and then to accomplish whatever they're doing. With some basically to hide their process and so on. All right, so this is part of what APT3 did. All right, and then you will see in the event they do the set value, rendered value, and then the IE user desktop keylogger DirectX. So there are some keylogger actually been installed into that system. And then if you look from the graph, you will see spiking, right? That spiking activity. So many times in the SOC, they are just looking for anomaly in terms of spikes on the graph and so on. And because let's say if you use Splunk, right? Splunk is just like this, like pretty much. To me, it's quite lame. I would prefer a link graph, right? So, and then you have the uh, basically log login, all of this. So this is one of the indicator. And then you see successful login. So after the failure, and then you got the successful login. What kind of ID? So look at the administrator, and then you have the source workstation. That means that workstation has been compromised. You got multiple Win workstation as well as MacBook workstation. All right. So from your hypothesis, the attacker has found and acquired valuable data. Now want to copy from the internal and then send it to external, right? And they're using the utilities within the environment. I'm asking a question earlier, nobody answered yet. If they use a PowerShell to create the exploit within the environment, what is the attack called? I have a higher expectation for the master students here. If you could Google or if you
Ada
could
je yang
understand
tahu
what it
tapi
is.
malu nak jawab. Tu Badul. LOTL.
Which is
Apa tu? Bat. Cakap je lah pula. Malu Bat.
malu sangat.
Living off the land.
Correct. Living off the land. So this is something you need to be careful as well. If you have to secure the environment, your infrastructure, you need to limit the access to the living of the land tools. PowerShell, the batch scripting, the what else? Anything that's built into the system. All right. So just imagine if you cannot download a file into a system, all the malware also all blocked. If you can have a way to dump the file in a text file and then change that file into a PowerShell script, that's one. Second is if they're able to have a command line into the system, they can create the script itself using PowerShell and then execute it. They don't have to download anything. They can create the script directly on that system. So that's a living of the land. So if the system doesn't require to have PowerShell, you disable it. So you disable all the PowerShell in the environment except the servers that need to have the PowerShell. And then you monitor the PowerShell execution on that system that you allow such living of the land to run. All right. So that's another technique hypothesis in your threat hunting. Any system with a PowerShell enable, you need to start looking. Well, if you got everything in the environment having PowerShell, tough luck. Then you need to find other ways, right? Some of detection, I'll leave it to you for you to read on this one. I'll give a copy of this afterwards. And then looking at the data volume. On that investigation, they see that from this IP and then this host name, the amount of data that's been exfiltrated. So bytes, kilobytes, megabyte. So 260 megabyte of data from 182.100.67.4, and then next one is 121 megabyte, 80 megabyte, and then 88 kilobyte, and then 45 kilobyte. And then from here, you will see a spike on the amount of data on the FTP. This one is quite simple, I would say, because you can monitor the FTP activities. Usually network team will be able to see this data, the amount on protocol, source and destination, and the amount of data. Network can tell you that. So usually they will monitor and then basically they can tell you, hey, why there's a spike in traffic from this host going external, right? But if they're using well-known protocol, so DNS is one, HTTP is another, and so on. It's much more difficult to sort out whether that is valid or abnormal. All right, so data that has been exfiltrated. So once you see that, and then you need to find what's the process that's running on that host that's sending that data. You will see the command, whether it's you do. Remember, I've done many memory forensic workshop before for Dr. Fakria's class as well as some other classes. So when you do the memory forensics, you will see the command that's run to perform this task. So once you able to do that that command, and you know the location, and you see that archive.pst, this is a mail file, right? So the archive mail of that victim has been basically exfiltrated. So just imagine if this user is a CEO of a company having all, or maybe the architect or engineer who's designing the software, then they will have all this data in the email, right? Okay. So just to recap, and how to use the MITRE attack. I'll leave sometimes for question and answers. Hopefully, we will close shortly. Okay. The chat just appeared briefly and then gone. I need to open up the chat here. If you can see it, I think it's easier.
Sorry, cik lagi. When you query on the Splunk, right? So basically you how you know what to query, and is there any cheat sheet or any documentation that you always follow or somewhat? Can you can you share with us?
You're talking about the command, the query command for Splunk, is it?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, I think I have some books as well as material on Splunk. If you want, I can give you access on that one.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so give me your email address afterwards. Okay, and then I will basically give you access to my Google G Drive for that particular Splunk data.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other question?
Hello, Mr. Fadzil. Sorry.
Yes.
So I have questions about previously you just explained on the execution attacks, right? So me myself more exposed on the application level instead of the infra level. So I would like to know, how do we trace any attacks or threat that happens between, for example, uh, there's a company that hosts a system, and the system is maintained by microservice. So unfortunately, there is a message queue that exposed on the internet, but myself have a little bit difficult to trace what program they execute that message queue. But somehow attacker uh, could have already find a way to pump any data into the message queue. Is there any way that we can check or log that connections. That's my questions.
Okay, that's getting into a bit more into forensics, but it's okay. So first of all, if the you need to determine one is whether is a remote attack, remote RCE, remote code execution. They can basically run due to vulnerability on that MQ whatever, and then they can basically pump that directly, or as a code actually running on that system itself. So you need to determine that. So first of all, you need to do a memory dump and then do a further analysis on the memory. Among other things you need to look at is a process that run on the system. So if it's a Windows system, inside there's a way, there's a place where any code or any software that run on the system, they have a backup of that executable actually kept within the PF file. I forgot what's the term on that one, but in one of my slide before. So every execution of a software, actually, there's a copy of that software being kept by the OS. You can look for that particular file. Within that file, there's a list of the software that run prior, and then you can extract when it was executed. And then you need to look at the application level as well. When I'm not sure whether there's a log or something like that. There should be a log. What has been pushed, who actually been pushed, and so on. So you need to look at it memory level, at the network level. So network level, let's say if it's a message queue, right? And then you have a lot of connections to that message queue. You need to look at the connection that will execute the code we talked about earlier. So if you run a command to look at netstat, for example, netstat, that will show the process minus APO, if I'm not mistaken, to show the protocol, the target and source, and then the state of the connection, whether it's established, basically listening, and so on. So you need to gather a number of data in order for you to do that analysis for that incident. But you shouldn't just leave it like that. You need to gather the evidence so that you can do the analysis. You need to do the memory dump. It depends on the system though. If the system has a terabyte of memory, that would be tough. Then you can do a direct analysis on the memory itself and dump the specific areas of your interest. Okay, hopefully that answers.
Understood.
Yeah, that's you need to perform forensics on that one.
I see.
Any other question? All right. So if not, you can leave for the. We got 20 minutes left. All right. So basically, last part here. How to use the MITRE attack framework. First, you need to familiarize yourself with the MITRE attack framework. The reason is each framework, they break down the type of attack, what's the activity on that. For each activities, what's the sub activities that they can do. They include multiple operating system, right? If you can see, Windows is included, Unix is included, even Mac is also included. So each of those breakdown sub activities, sub routines, it also give you the details. If they do execution, then what would be the log that will be generated? You need to be aware some systems they might not perform or not enable for extensive logging. All right, you need to be aware about that. So if it doesn't, then what else you have? Then you need to do other dumping and so on. If you have other tools like EDR, then EDR, you can create rules. One thing when you need to bear in mind, when you are using commercial, open source, whatever tools, they usually come up with their own default configuration with default rules and also standard rules that they will create and then they will deploy. It's quite common for commercial one. Right. So what happened is a number of times the attacker will study that particular security controls that you got. Right. So if they studied your security controls and they know, let's say you are using the X antivirus or X EDR, the X EDR will have a set of rules, thousand of them. These are the rules. So they look at all the rules and then they will run that rules against their activities before they attack you. So that's why if you look at LinkedIn profile, a lot of ignorance security professional people, they listed down the solution that they have expertise, they used to have, they used to know, they used to run, they used to manage. What it is? I'm expert in this X antivirus. I expert this whatever. If you look at my, I don't have any solution listed. The reason is, if you are currently still in that company, and then you are listed that solution that been used in that company, very likely if I want to like that company, looking at your profile, I know the capability that you're using, I will have my own version of that software. I will run all default rules on that software against my attack, my plan attack, and then I will make sure that all those rules will not trigger to my attack. Means what? If you have a vendor, you use that solution, EDR for example, you have, if you look from the MITRE ATT&CK perspective, you need to find areas where you can create your own rules. Your own rules. So if they have done it and then they basically do a baseline against their own technique, there's extra rules that you created that doesn't exist with the vendor and that potentially attackers, that it will trigger if they run that in the environment. Bear in mind, because you will see it in your professional environment or work, right? It will maybe out of 1,000 rules, all of them default from vendor, none of them trigger. You create one, suddenly your loss is triggering because of that. So the key is study this MITRE ATT&CK framework. It's very, very beneficial. The study that they've done save a lot of time that previously I do not have such luxury to have this framework, right? This framework is just very recent for the last few years. Previously, 2 decades ago doesn't exist. I have to create my own. All right. So with this, familiarize yourself, study that techniques, and the techniques, the tactics, and the sub-tactics and techniques, and then you map that to the environment that you got. So not just for the contest, but then if you are working in such environment, you try to map that. What software, OS capabilities that you got, and then you map it there, right? You got Windows system. Then for each one, which Windows attack that applies to this environment, and then you will see very you will see that applicable attack and techniques for your environment, you leave X number of them, and then you look at it. Wow, actually, if you run all of this, your environment will be compromised. And then you compare that with the vulnerability that exists, security controls, other security controls that you got. What's the residue? And then from there you can nail out what's the possibility of attackers in your environment, right? So map that in your environment. And then create the data. So once you know, you map the environment, that leave you to applicable tactics and techniques, right? And then from there you can create the rules. And then once you create the rules, then you can compare that to the heading, and you already set like a threat, right? All of this, these are the potential that might happen in environment, and then you go straight into that rules that you have created. If it's threat, then you know it's there, because you already nailed it down only to the applicable potential attacks and techniques in environment. So from there, of course, once you have that, you enhance your incident response, and then collaborate with threat intelligence, and then share that information under the threat intelligence community. Okay, so in-action perspective, find tactics, and then basically learn about the attacks, the behavior, and the tools, procedures you read on that, and then how to defeat mitigation. I think this is our scope for the contest, but then from your work perspective, right? Mitigation, you need to have it there, and detection. So if you have detect in your hunting, how can you help team to be able to detect in the future, right? So usually that's part of the cycle. You do the threat hunting, and from your findings, you will help to improve the detection in the environment. That's where the step 4 it is. All right, and again, understand your data sources, where it's coming from, and then the traffic. The attack navigator is another capability within the MITRE attack. They make that attack navigator available. You can test it out. I haven't. I just look at it. So there is a way for you to visualize certain things, something that you can play with. All right. So you got 10 more minutes. This is last slide that I created back then when I was at Standard Chartered. I presented at the FSISAC conference in Singapore. Took me a while to get this done. It's like the fish bone. But the thing is, just to give you an idea, on the left side, you got the real time of the attack. Driver compromise, all of that can happen within seconds. But the SIEM correlation is actually more than seconds, usually minutes and hours, right? And then fish and so on, right? As you can see, you go to the right, it would take much longer and longer and longer. And same thing with the for Defender, things that they want to do to deploy complex detection analysis tools, for example, took weeks and months, actually more than that. So if it's a, let's say you do not have Splunk and you want to have Splunk in the environment, it may take years to get the approval, to design it, and then to buy the hardware, whatever it is. Took years, believe it or not, right? So bear in mind, so the attack is actually much faster than the defenders can do. So that is a real challenge for all right, conclusion wise, as you can see, threat hunting is one of the highly demanded skill. A lot of people still don't have that full exposure on multiple field, multiple areas that I just talked about. So the detection part, good example, in Malaysia, one of the most comprehensive detection skill set that deal directly at the network level. For example, sense one because I was among the very few certified in Malaysia on GC, right? Very few. I think just less than 5 people previously, and many of them did not even maintain that certification. It contained very in-depth analysis on how to do detection, and many times as I look at the market, right, the environment, none of the courses as well as the understanding and skill set available. So that's only one area, detection, right? And then yet many of our focus are more on the attack, test, hacking, and so on. Detection is one of the key areas. So detection is one. The X, pen test techniques, and so on. That another area that you have to. And then cyber intelligence. Once you know the basic cyber threat intelligence is actually quite easy to master because it's the skill set itself doesn't require to be too technical. But the reverse engineering to obtain the cyber threat intelligence, then it's very technical because you need to reverse engineer the malware, and then you to obtain the configuration files and so on, and extract the TTP, the tools, technique, and procedures from there. That one's very technical. All right, so the key capability. I think from this presentation, give some overview what other skills required, but you have a shortcut in which mastering the MITRE attack and then adopt that with the rest of the areas I just mentioned, you'll be able to master it. With that, thank you very much. I got 5 minutes left. Any questions?
Okay. I have one question.
Sure.
Is it possible if we automate the meter attack with the alarm to the so what is the procedure that we to make the automate suggestion
So
or
the
ideas on this
first
and
aspect not very clear. What you want to do is Splunk?
automation integration with the meter attack. So basically the detection will be automate lah. Like they can detect proactively the threat and so on, so on. So when we integrate the meter attack with the Splunk, yeah,
Mm.
and then
Yeah.
you can see that right.
So usually depending on the data that you pump into Splunk, right? So that's one. So uh, specific right, on the activity. So what you do is with that you create a use case. So the use case is admin account modification, right? For example, admin account modification, and then you highlight use system, and then the event log is which one? 4738, 4727, and so on. That's one example. So you have rules. If any of this event triggered, then you have potential of account modification, and then you look for other activities. So one is account has been modified. Second is account has been created, and then account has been created with administrative privilege, whether it's global admin or uh, admin groups or local admin, all of that, right? Rules create for one, and you add it into the use case of administrator account and compromised or modified, right? So that's the one example. So what you do is from the MITRE tech framework, you create use cases, and based on the use cases contain all those activities that's been highlighted by the framework. So if any logs coming into your Splunk with that criteria, you trigger that rule.
So basically the threat hunting is the event that has been occurred, right? So the like the threat model so that we can enhance our analytics and so on.
Okay, maybe I want to highlight this. You can see a little part of my diagram here. Can you see that?
Yep. Yes.
Seconds and minutes, hours, you got detection. After that, you cannot do detection. So the SOC monitoring by default, the process is as the alert coming into the SIEM, it will basically run or basically will be run against those alert, and then it will generate security events, and potentially from that security events of interest, it become potential incident. Okay? However, things that you missed or not detected, it will not reappear. You got that, right?
Okay.
The alert will not regenerate. Happen new, and then the triggered alert new will come into SIM again. It only come in once. If you miss that, what will happen? You will not see it again. That is why you will miss, and then after that is not no longer detection, but it's under threat hunting. You got that?
See?
It might be there. It was an SIEM, but you said, "Oh, this false positive, gone case," and then nobody did again until you start hunting. And said, "Actually, that is true positive," and that happened
So
to Target, a retail company, a big one. I used to go Target buy stuff in before. Target was attacked, and the initial thing they see in the point of sales, oh, that's a false positive. And then they put an exception into it. Now you look at it, and that's a real attack, and they lost the whole data. Okay.
so basically we need to do the use case banyak juga.
Correct, correct. Some of those quite similar to what detections are trying to do, but you do it in different ways. But you start with hypothesis. I mean, looking at the alert that coming in the system. Different approach.
Alright, thank you, Interpreter.
My pleasure. Anything else? Cik Mohsin, you have any question?
Yes.
Yes. Any question?
Yeah, I mentioned regarding so for example in a SIM we want to be able to detect things that have not been ruled on upon. All right. What about from a packet perspective? If we are using analysis from packet perspective, for example, from the protocols perspective, if we see any anomalies are currently happening, is that also part of detection? I mean, like, for example, we need rules in a Splunk or a SIM tool in order for us to see any alerts. But if we were to look at it from a network perspective, we be able to detect anomalies for us to see that as a threat.
Okay, good question. So the key here is when you look at the alerts, right? The alert actually coming from multiple security controls. One of them is intrusion detection system IDS. So if the alert is coming from IDS, the IDS itself is basically inspecting the network packets that going through in the network. So it has a number of rules inside the IDS that will inspect any anomaly that potentially happen on the packet. So, for example, in TCP packet, if you this is by standard, right? Standard by protocol standard. If you want to make a connection, TCP connection, whether it's a web connection, email connection, whatever it is, which is using TCP protocol, transport connection protocol. Then first you need to start with sending SYN packet. You will receive a SYN ACK packet, and then you will respond back with ACK packet. SYN ACK, ACK. This is considered three-way handshake for TCP protocol. And then after we completed that, and then we allowed to push for data. So I want to FTP, for example, to send a file. Then I can send them. So in the sense that if it is received in such a way, following this standard, then the basically the packet must contain one of those flags that I mentioned. So the first initiation would be SYN flag. The second would be SYN ACK flag. SYN and ACK flag is actually set. Set is actually 1, it's not 0. And then you respond with ACK. So the ACK flag is set, which is 1, not 0. So if you send a request, a packet, the initial packet, each packet that you initiate comes with initial sequential number, ISN. Now I get to very specific on the protocols. But here is if you make something abnormal packet request. I send a SYN request instead of SYN. I send SYN and then reset in same packet. That's become abnormal, not following standard. How can you establish the TCP connection every time you want to reset connection? So DS will detect this packet. It contains SYN and then reset, and it will tell you I have SYN and reset packet coming in. So it's already inspected the packet on your behalf. Once you look at that, you will see the source is trying to send or to hack the stack of the TCP protocol and send it. It's really represented in the alert that's been sent to SIM. Got that?
So yeah, so basically the SIM tool, it covers everything that's coming from IDS, IPS, or whatsoever.
Correct. The data source.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Anybody else? I know it's already past 6 minutes, but since it's Friday night, of course, tomorrow is last day for school and work. Last chance. I will send you to Vakaria, and then she can share with the rest of you. Okay. And then my email address is also in the last page. Yeah. So send me your email address for you to access the Splunk books and materials earlier. Okay, last chance. If none, then back to you, Doctor.
Dia tak ada dah. But tak nak tanya apa-apa. Tadi siang tadi macam nak tanya banyak je pasal tracking. Tak ada dah. Betul? Bermuneh?
I don't have any question. I'm still digesting the threat hunting. Yes.
After 2 hours still digesting.
Yes. maybe in the future I can ask something to you.
Yeah, read a little bit more on the framework. It basically has a lot of details there. Yeah.
Alright.
And then read a little bit more on the cyber intelligence as well. Then about trackers and then the DP, the IOCs, how you basically use those in the threat hunting. So for example, if you have the certain IOCs or TTPs, then you search in your databases, you found those, of course, it's already that's considered a low-hanging fruits to find, but actually finding that is difficult because of amount of data that you got. So you got one IP address. You want, so let's say there's 1 million IP addresses of the IOCs of attack out there, and then you want to compare, basically search that in your SAEM database. You overload your SAEM. So that is challenges. But you can find that that's an easy one. Okay.
Alright, thank you.
Welcome.
Dah, dia lagi nak tanya. Kau tak boleh je direct email dengan The Fadzil. Kalau nak tanya apa-apa mana tak clear lagi kan. Okay. Ada apa kau tak ada, kita
Last chance.
okay. Dah tak,
Best
dia
lah.
orang ni at least dia ada battery pula. But they actually track his support kan. Jadi macam okay, macam tu punya. Alright. So terima kasih banyak Cik Fadzil dalam
Sama-sama.
kesibukan sedih untuk kami.
Prioritize, priority one.
Terima kasih
Actually,
banyak.
my son is joining Mohsin there. So
Oh,
so it's
aduh.
suddenly he got hidayah
Ah,
to follow.
Alhamdulillah.
Uh,
Oh,
Learning, but already starting tomorrow. So my able to pass the interview.
Okay. Dah lepas tipu kau tak menuntut ilmu, rugi sangat lah. Okay,
Alright.
terima kasih banyak sekali lagi Cik Fadzil atas semua kesian. Semoga Allah balas bagi ganjaran lah insyaAllah. Okay, so, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.